No one knows what the future holds, but if a new house is in your future, I can help from a safe distance. I'm Nick Acosta, your downtown expert, and I'm hosting safe and sanitary open houses. Nothing is different except for temperature checks at the door and masks are required. But it still smells like there are fresh baked cookies in the oven. So come on by one of my safe and sanitary open houses, and I'll say welcome home from 6 feet away.
This is Home to All, an all-inclusive real estate podcast with your host, Nicholas Acosta. Nick sits down with guests to talk about real estate and how it works. Reach him at downtown.expert on Facebook and Instagram, or his website, www.downtown.expert, or call or text him at 407-508-8809. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, everybody. This is Nicholas Acosta with Downtown Expert Realty Home to All podcast, brought to you by Blanchard Insurance. And I've got Mike Tinsetic and Jason Sandville with Blanchard Insurance with me today. Let me get them on here with you guys. Hey there, guys. How's it going, Mike and Jason?
Hey, Nick. How are you?
Hey, great, Nick. How are you?
I'm doing well. So what's been going on, on an insurance out there, and what are new things you've been seeing in regards to home purchases out there?
Well, let me start off by introducing, before we get into it, my background here, which is a new campaign that we started. We've recently launched a boat, watercraft, yacht division that is located and headquartered out of St. Petersburg, which is interesting. And that little marble character back there is called the Mariness. So if you go to the mariness.com, that is our new boating and watercraft division, which is pretty cool. And we're launching a lot of fun campaigns, kind of like the Geicos and the Progressives of the world over the next year or so. So that's exciting for us. But what's going on in the industry on homeowners insurance, especially for all the realtors out there, is just more of the same. Rates going up, carriers having diminishing capacity, meaning they can't write in certain areas, and underwriting getting more strict, as you've seen on your own recent house purchase. And that's just continuing, and it's going to continue over the next, unfortunately, realistically, over the next 2 to 5 years until things get better. But there is some legislation that they are considering up in Tallahassee, which hopefully should have an impact on things. But as you know, Nick, I mean, it's kind of like they also have another bill where they're trying to sunset, personal injury protection again. And it's kind of like, why are we revisiting things that don't work? So,
Right.
Your guess is as good as mine. What are you seeing out there, Jason?
The underwriting is really what I've been seeing in the last couple of months has just gotten really, really strict, where it's just harder and harder to write because there's a lot less carriers out there that are here in Central Florida. So they're tightening up on the restrictions, and it's just making it a little more difficult to write. But the good thing, we've got lots of carriers, so we can help out.
Oh no, yeah, it's definitely been crazy because I reached out to you, both Mike and Jason, yesterday. I'm working with one of my listing agents. They have a property, and all these things came up, and they're buying it with this. The buyer's buying it with a conventional loan, but the inspector didn't do a 4-point inspection or an official 4-point, and it was built in 1978. What are your thoughts on that, and have you guys been seeing this trend happening?
Jason could probably speak better about it than I can, since he's more of the expert at the homeowners insurance than I am right now. But what we're seeing on one problem with the inspections that are coming back, there are some unfortunately horrible inspectors out there. And when we get some of these inspections, I mean, half of them say not applicable and unknown, and they're kind of useless by the time we get to us. and the frustration on the buyer and, their realtor and with us is, we have to, just like a loan doc. I mean, we have to submit these to underwriters at these insurance companies. Whenever they see something that is unknown listed on some of these, state inspection forms, that are, handed down from citizens. I mean, they are uniform, but we send them in, they come back and they go, well, it's great that you put, the plumbing age on there is unknown. So how's an underwriter supposed to look at it? Is it 1 year old or is it 100 years old? They have no idea. So again, just like your mortgage docs, they're shooting it back to us going, this is unacceptable. We're not going to accept this. And I don't think the inspectors know enough to know that these carriers, like right now, are hyper restrictive. So when they're filling these inspections out, they need to be more, more detailed, more hyper vigilant when they're doing these things. And when the buyers and realtors are getting these inspections back, they need to be questioning them and going, okay, well, I mean, and just for their sake, I mean, would you want to buy a home not knowing how old the hot water heater is or how old the AC is or anything like that? So that we're seeing a lot of that. And Jason, what are you seeing? You're seeing a lot of that too, right?
Yeah, I'd say about 40% are coming back with unknown on a lot of this stuff. And like Mike said, we've got to put a number down, and if we don't know, and then we send it off to underwriting and they don't know, I mean, it gets kicked back. And then when you go back to the inspectors, they're just like, well, I don't see a permit. They're not doing any of the due diligence of trying to find, the information.
Or even giving us like an estimation of how old the system is. I mean, obviously, if the plumbing is PVC, well, it's probably been updated in the last 20 years. If it's a 50-year-old home, I mean, they weren't using PVC back then. Or even some of these electrical panels. I mean, they can take a look at it, and realistically, if it's a new GE panel, they can make an estimation that, hey, this has probably been replaced even with there's out of permit. And then when you get into the roofs, the problem with the roof permits is, and I'm going back to when I first got in the business in 2003, but when you had all those storms during 2004, 2005, there was so much widespread damage that the counties, and too, I mean, even during Irma, we saw a lot of this as well. There was so much widespread damage that the permitting couldn't keep up. So, and they were allowing people like, hey, just go ahead and get your roof put on. The insurance companies don't care about the permits. The mortgage companies don't care about the permits. County doesn't care about them. Slap on a roof. So probably about, and depending on the location, like let's say Osceola County, back in 2004, 2005, there was probably, 50% of the permits got done. And then the other 50%, there was no permits put on file. And that happens a lot with plumbing. That happens a lot with air conditioning systems, plumbing systems, electrical systems. Sometimes the permits aren't filed. And again, when you have a catastrophe, like something like, let's say, Michael up in the Panhandle, they're not pulling 1 million permits because that would just slow down the reconstruction efforts, the emergency efforts with FEMA coming in, everything. So these inspectors you have to kind of hold them to the fire right now and just tell them, give me your best guesstimate. Give me something on there that it's anticipated life is left in the system. Because the insurance companies, from their perspective, do they really want to take on this risk? Just like a lender, do they want to really take on the risk knowing that you're not going to be able to make the mortgage payments? Well, it's the same thing in the insurance business. Do they want to insure a risk that there's a chance the house could burn down the next day or the roof's going to fall off the next day? No, of course they don't want to do it.
No, that's just brought me to a thought while you guys were talking, when you were talking, Mike, that the property that I'm personally purchasing in St. Pete, funny that you're talking about permits, because there are permits on this property from 2007 to 2004 that were pulled by not the current owner, but the owner at the time back then. And the lender said that these had to be addressed. So we got them addressed, but it was a roof and fascia permit in 2004, and they just were expired. But the lender said they couldn't proceed unless those were, taken care of. Well, because of title, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, and too, that's brings an important question about the title work. I mean, it's a possibility of contractors, contractor liens coming back and whatnot. So.
What about you, Jason? Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I've noticed a couple times is the inspectors are putting the stuff on the 4-point like they're needed, but then when they are addressed by the seller and done, they're not wanting to go back out and do that inspection to, redo the 4-point. They're just like, oh, just, send in some receipts. You'll be, you'll be good to go. Whereas no, it's not good. I mean, we want to send in the cleanest 4-point possible. So when the underwriters see it, it's, they don't dig in any further than they need to.
Yeah, I mean, it's as important as how the appraisal comes back. I mean, a lender doesn't want to see an appraisal coming back with, blanks all over the place, empty spaces. And that's the same thing with the, the insurance companies now. They're just, and especially because the market is so tight, they're not willing to take on like any risk and, whatsoever. So again, it's, our advice to, all the realtors and buyers out there is have a conversation before the guy even starts the inspection on the property and just say, listen, if I need dates, I need permits, I need you to do your due diligence, do your job, make sure everything is on this form. And if you got to come back out, if I got to fix something, I might as well just, pay a little bit extra now so I can guarantee that you're going to come back out here and do this. And I understand. I mean, a little empathy on their side is they are so backed up right now with insurance inspections because real estate market is booming right now. I understand that, they are busy, but again, they weren't really home inspectors until back, I think it was like in the mid to late 2000s. They weren't even considered, like they didn't have a DBR license. And now that because they go through I think it's NACHI, National Association of Home Inspectors, now they're required by the state of Florida to actually have some form of training and some form of licensure. But even till then, I mean, anybody really could do a home inspection. You really didn't need, certified, licensure and credentials. But you got to, again, you got to hold that to them. Be like, look, you're a licensed individual in the state of Florida, just like an insurance agent, just like a realtor, just like a lender. So they need to be held accountable to the same standards that we are.
Yeah, I agree with that. 100%.
And I understand too, I mean, and to add one thing, and I kind of learned this the hard way on one of my own properties because of a faulty inspection, was the fact that in Florida, the way I understand it, and again, as a disclaimer, I'm not an attorney, for fact, but the way I understand it on the inspections is if there is any exposure, like liability lawsuits, like they failed to negate this and, look at this and, to be 100% accurate, I think the reason that it's just becomes passe to a degree, I guess, for lack of a better term, is I think they can only be held legally liable for the actual cost of the inspection. So, for example, like if I go to purchase this house and the inspector negates to tell me that I have a bad electrical panel, and if he doesn't catch one wire and the house burns down to the ground, I believe the only thing you could actually go after and sue the home inspector for is the actual cost of the inspection. So, if it's a new purchase inspection, you're going to get $450. If it's just a 4-point home inspection, you're only going to get $150. And that's the way I understand it in the state of Florida. Even if they carry insurance, that is the only thing that you can go after and sue them for is the cost of that inspection, which baffles me. But, again, I'm not an attorney, but that's the way I understand it from personal experience.
Wow, that is crazy.
I know. I didn't know that they were only, I mean, we as realtors and me as a broker too, but we're responsible for if we do the wrong thing with advertising, the DBPR can send us a fine for $500. Or we can get fines up to higher than that for other things. Whereas I would be thinking that the home inspectors would be held more accountable in terms of financial accountability for their jobs.
Yeah, I was really surprised at that. And then even on the construction side, I mean, I hear story after story sometimes on new construction. And I have a really close friend going through the same thing, building a house. And I mean, I think he's on his second or third contractor. And you have to be really careful. I mean, you got to make sure these guys are bonded, licensed, insured, and to the hilt, because they're always, I mean, that's just been normal in the construction industry that they're taking money and forwarding it to the next job and to the next job and the next job. But I mean, in their case, my friend's case, I mean, they put in faulty windows, walked off the job, second contractor came in, poured concrete in the garage, walked off the job, and you can't get a hold of these people and never see them again. So you really got to, do a lot of front end work to protect yourself, so you're not getting screwed over, on the back end.
I completely agree on that. So how about we're coming up? I know we're in Florida, so spring and summer and fall and winter are the same months or the same weather for us, except for a couple of days here and there. Although it's really nice out today. What about like when you get insurance? What about like boating, like liability, or even like swimming pools? Because a lot of people will be at people's houses for the summer having parties. Well, of course, somewhat, I guess, with COVID, but you know what I mean.
Well, it's a great point you bring that up, and let's start with swimming pools. And this is going to apply to anything that involves water. Water is one of the most dangerous things, and everybody knows that. I mean, you go swimming in the ocean. I mean, you have undertows, you have waves, people drown in the ocean. That's why you have lifeguards. It's no different just because you have a swimming pool or you own a boat. A good majority of the liability claims that we see when it comes to bodily injury and it comes to wrongful death always seems a good percentage of them. I would say probably 25, maybe even to 35% of these claims, which turn into $1 million lawsuits, are a result of water. And I'm sure Jason can touch on this a little bit more from, being a father of 2 kids. But nowadays, I mean, like, I think we're all pretty of, similar age, but, when we were growing up, I mean, it wasn't a birthday pool party every single weekend. But when you have kids, that are, of that age, between the ages of probably, 2 to 12 years old, it just seems these parents are having pool parties like every single weekend. Like, Jason, I'm at your house next weekend, you're at mine, and, Nick's coming over and blah, blah, blah. And we're going to have beers and, sit around, and there's going to be 20 kids in the pool. Well, guess what? When that happens on your property, the more likely, the more times it happens, the more people you have, the likelihood of somebody getting injured, slipping, hitting their head, wrongful drowning and whatnot is liable to happen. And guess what? Even though they're maybe your relatives, they may be your best friends, if something happens to their kid on your property, you're going to be held liable for. And we've seen it time after time. I don't understand why my best friend or my cousin is suing me. Well, their kid is in a coma who almost drowned or has a permanent brain injury. Yes, do you think there's not 100 lawyers telling them to sue you? And yeah, in some of these lawsuits, we see go up to millions of dollars. And that's why I always say, like, if you have a swimming pool on your property and you don't carry a personal umbrella policy, you are just putting a gun to your head eventually. And if you have small kids, especially, it's a bad idea. I mean, for the amount of a cost of an umbrella for, an average cost of $250 per year, just to negate that if it ever happens, why? That just baffles me that more people don't do it. What are your thoughts on that, Jason?
Yeah, 100%. I've got, we go over to my in-laws all the time. They've got a pool, and we've got my wife's sister who comes over with their 3 kids. I got my 2 kids, and, you get talking, and every once in a while, look back and like, oh crap, one of the kids is right by the pool. And and it can happen in a split second. And the lawyers, they're convincing the people, oh, you're not really suing them, you're suing their insurance company. So they kind of, but yeah, no, I got to talk to my in-laws about getting an umbrella policy with the amount of times we're over there.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, anything on the water. When you get into, transition that, the same conversation over to boating, we've had more $1 million claims over the years involved in boating accidents than anything else. And it's been anything from, Nick, you come over to my house and they'll let you borrow my wave runner, my jet ski. You've had a couple drinks, you're tearing it up around the lake. Guess next thing happens, you go straight into my dock. You break your neck. We're airlifting you out, and guess what? The next day, I'm hearing from your attorney suing me for allowing you to go on my jet ski and harm yourself. And I can't blame you for that. Or you're out of my boat, in my ski boat, and you're going, you're like, I want to get on the inner tube, and I forget to shut off the motor, and you step on, you step on the propeller. I mean, you chop off your foot. We've had it where inner tubing accidents, people sling the rope out, they sling them into shore, they hit some rocks. We've had that. We've had wrongful drowning. We've had a boat catch on fire. I mean, over the years, we've seen it all. And now all I can tell you is, and what's scary is, you see these pictures on Facebook, and it's, a good number of people in my office own boats. And they even made this comment, when you look at things like the St. John's waterway, when you see that on a weekend during summer, it looks like Lake Havasu in spring break. And here's the thing about that is, yes, I mean, they patrol it, game wardens and whatnot, looking for, drunken boaters and whatnot. And of course, you can drink on the boat as long as the driver's not drinking. Everybody is out there having a good time drinking. The boats are tied up together. There's 100 boats. It's slippery, it's sliding. And people, I'm surprised that you don't hear of more incidents where people I got drunk, I was jumping from one boat to another, I hit my head, somebody drowned. If I was an attorney and if I was Morgan & Morgan or Dan Newland or somebody like that, I literally would have a billboard where right next to the boat ramp that goes into the water saying, if you were injured in a boating accident, if somebody knocked you off your paddleboard, if this happened to you, call me. And I'm surprised you don't see more of that. I consider it like the St. John's, really, it's kind of like the I-4 of, the waterways. And I see that at some point, once the auto just gets too oversaturated, that they're going to start looking at that, the attorneys, and saying, this is a very profitable business. Because you got to remember, Nick, and you'll know this, that there's no fault on water. There's no PIP. It goes straight to the liability. And again, if you got a boat and you're not carrying, $1 million in liability, I just think I think you're stupid. I hate to be offensive to anybody out there, but you could run over another ski line, a tow rope. You could run over a swimmer and not even know it. That is why water is so dangerous. And I just tell everybody, I'm like, and I'm not just, Josh and anybody here, we've seen it over the years, time and time again. And it's, again, a boat can be just a very dangerous situation.
I know now that we had this show talking about this, now we're going to see Morgan & Morgan and Dan Newland put up new billboards about boats. If any of them are listening, or anybody they know, or any other attorney, they're going to start doing that now. You've watched. No, it's I completely agree. And yeah, so talking about the liability you have, like you're talking about having like family over, or if I'm causing a ruckus over at Mike's house over there, like he said. No, my late father, who was a doctor, was a trauma doctor. So he's seen saw a lot of things in his life, obviously with accidents. Whenever we have a party with family or friends, he always used to say stuff about, I guess making sure that nobody left, obviously, if they were heavily under the influence, that they were going to drive under the influence. Because is that true that the owner of the house would be liable if they left a party at your house and got into an accident and killed somebody?
Absolutely. If you were serving alcohol at your house, absolutely. You are responsible for what is occurring on your property. If there's a shooting at your house, I know we've talked about that in the past with people like leaving out guns, anything that happens on your property lines. And even, in some cases, even off your property lines. And especially when you look at clients with substantial net worth, likely, like a trauma surgeon or, a CEO or anything like that. It's also off your property. We've had claims where, somebody was playing golf and accidentally hit somebody else in the head with a club and, caused brain damage. Well, you can get sued for that. And we see that in sports. If me and Jason go out to a bar and we get in a fight one night and, Jason gives me an uppercut and, I go into a coma, well, guess what? Jason's responsible. So your homeowner's insurance does extend off property lines. It actually extends liability most of the time, like worldwide, on your primary. Now, on rental properties, it's only premises, and that brings to another thing. Like rental properties, believe it or not, are probably, I would say, 10 times more likely to have a liability claim than your primary residence, just because of the lack of controls that are there. And we had this recently happen. We advised a client to get a personal umbrella policy because they had bought their kids homes, and the homes were actually in college town. So, for example, they had one kid going to, UCF, so they bought a home over near UCF, so the kid could live there and, go to school as well. And they did the same thing up in Gainesville for the other child for UF. And we were like, you need to get an umbrella policy. And it was like, well, why? And we said, well, I'm not trying to say your child is a criminal or you're doing anything, delinquent behavior or anything like that. It's not them we're worried about. It's friends. They decide to have a house party. If somebody comes over, one of their friends to that property and drinks too much or takes drugs or anything happens on that property, guess what? It's coming back to mom and dad. And it's a huge liability risk. And it's like, you're not there to control it. Your kids are only going to be able to contain it. And that's why we tell people who have rental properties, especially a lot of them, there's a lot more inherent risk, because you can think you can screen your tenants enough, but you will never know exactly everything that's going on at that property. And that, like I said, we see more liability claims on rental properties than anything.
No, I completely agree. How about Jason? Well, yeah, because when if you have multiple rental properties, then it's harder to keep track of what's going on if it's not your personal property. And then who knows if who your tenants are bringing over, or what's going on, what kind of parties are going on, and all that kind of stuff. Maybe you said that as of right now, there is nothing on the books. Is that still correct, that there's nothing on the books in terms of COVID? What happens if, maybe in the future, if somebody goes over to somebody's rental property and they say they got COVID from this person, who's responsible for that? In case somebody decides to make a claim.
That's something that they really haven't even addressed yet. A lot of it is more related to, there's actually an interesting case on COVID right now. So it's still with the businesses. All the litigation is, with business interruption and business liability, and nobody really knows. It hasn't gotten that far down. But one interesting case that I saw recently was where an employee got COVID, supposedly at work, died, and the wife wound up suing the company. Or it was that, or the husband got it, and then the wife contracted it from the husband, and then the wife sued the company for indirect contact. So that was a really interesting one. It was kind of like, this is a way of, if the employee had sued the company, there would have been no coverage, but can the wife sue the company? Or can their neighbor, and they contracted it from him because he brought it home from work, can there be a third-party lawsuit to go after that company? Those are still tied up in court right now, so we won't know anything, in the not too distant future. But I think eventually, yes, over the years we'll get to see what the answer to that question is.
Most definitely. Is there anything you want to add to that, Jason, or have you seen anything?
As far as the COVID, not really. But like Mike said, I think we'll wait and see how these lawsuits end up. And if they started going, and actually awarding them, I think it'll be more and more prevalent moving forward.
No, that's what I was going to bring. I know this is a little bit of different topic, but it's still on insurance. I just had my broker's course this morning for continuing education. And we talked about errors and omissions, and I thought about you guys because I got the policy through Blanchard, or that's where the agent that got it for me there through Blanchard. And the thing was, they were talking about, I brought up the subject that in you talked to me about, Mike, before, about putting COVID guidelines in my manual. Yes. And they said that was obviously a good idea because, and another thing was, this is something they taught me today I didn't even realize, and I went and looked at my policy right as she was talking about it, that even for open houses, that if you have to, like my says, errors and omissions insurance policy, your deck page says 4 hours maximum per open house, that I guess, is that true if you were to go past 4 hours that you're not covered anymore, or how does that work? you know?
Probably, unless it was an extreme situation. I mean, yes, I mean, it is policy language and can be ambiguous at times. So, I mean, probably in the likelihood, most claims are actually not denied or excluded. And that's just my personal opinion, my observation over the last 2 decades. So is policy language there and forced to exclude certain things? Yes. Is it there to deny claims for certain things? Yes. But it's also, they're not going to deny claims based on reasonable. And I'll give you more of a fact. Like, let's say, for example, liquor liability. That's a good one to talk about. And let's say you have liquor liability. Nick's going to open a bar, and on the application it says, Nick, I don't want you to ever have an 18-year-old in your establishment. Or, Nick, I never want you to have a drink special that goes below $2 per shot. But 6 to 8 months down the road, you just decide at that time, you were like, yeah, this is fine. I'm not doing this. But let's say 8 months down the road, you have one night where you have a special where you just happen to have a shot for $1.99. I don't know, something like that. Nickel beer night one night you decide to do, and somebody gets drunk and something happens. I mean, I can't guarantee you that they're going to pay out on the claim, but in our experience, the likelihood is like, yes, they're probably going to pay out on the claim, and then they're probably going to non-renew the policy and say, Nick, like, hey, you shouldn't have done this, yada, yada, you lied on the application, blah, blah, blah. We're going to pay this claim out, but we don't want to insure you ever again. We see more of that. And what you just brought up, I would say, I'm not a claims adjuster, I'm not an attorney, but I would say there's probably a good chance that they would still pay a claim, but they would just probably wind up non-renewing the coverage and say, go somewhere else.
Yeah, I know. So far, I guess if I work past 4 hours from a very busy open house, I may or may not be covered. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you don't have to carry around a stop clock. Because like I said, when you're talking about COVID and, what you can do, an ounce of prevention, like we always talked about, goes a long way. So as long as you take some measures and take some steps, that brings a sigh of relief to the insurance company, because it does give them, something, to lean back on. If you completely negate things like, you say you're, opening a, I don't know, a cheerleading gym, and then you open up a parkour or an extreme sports center, yes, I can see where the insurance company may say, like, well, what, you told us one thing, you're doing, another. I could see that happening. And, we see that, sometimes even on, rental properties, like somebody will buy a rental property and open it up for, have a business operating out of it, and then the place burns down. Well, guess what? If the insurance company comes out and is like, wait a minute, there was 8 offices in this, residential thing that you told us somebody was renting. I could see the insurance company making a very valid argument to exclude and deny coverage. But if it was something like, well, there was only 2 roommates and there was an an uncle, an extra uncle staying there, and blah blah blah. Yeah, they're probably going to wind up paying the claim in those cases.
Completely agree. All right, guys. So we're at the end. Is there anything that each of you want to share with the audience, like a piece of advice for the rest of the weekend, or?
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a nice weekend, hopefully. So just stay safe and enjoy the weather before it gets too hot.
My advice, like I said, is like everybody who's got a boat and is getting out on the water out there, or getting ready for summer with pool parties and everything else, is get one of those umbrella policies, call our office, talk to Jason. I mean, for the cost of it, the math is something ridiculous. I mean, it's for the amount of coverage you're getting per dollar for what you're paying for it is so de minimis. I mean, it's like a fraction of a cent. And I mean, literally, when you look at it, you're paying less, probably like 75 cents a day to have $1 million worth of coverage. And as you know, Nick, I mean, coming from the auto claim side, when an attorney sees, if there's something bad that happens and an attorney sees that $1 million and they go, look, I'm getting $300,000 out of that, guess what? They're going to convince their client to settle, because attorneys don't want to do the work. They don't want to go to trial. There's huge expenses on that, and it's not a guaranteed win. They want to go to the insurance company and say, okay, give us the $1 million and we'll walk away. Guess what? I'll convince my client that $700,000 is enough and I'm pocketing $300,000. Well, guess what? That's what you're probably going to need if you ever have a wrongful death or severe bodily injury happen in your swimming pool or on your boat. So to sleep well at night, the $250,000 for $256 or whatever it is a year is a good peace of mind. Now, if you're only carrying $10,000 on your boat, and guess what? Somebody chops their foot off in the rudder, the attorney goes, yeah, this is worth a lot more than $3,000. So when it comes to claims and liability lawsuits, that is the name of the game, is carrying enough coverage to get out of jail free and enough to pay. It's like consider it a prepaid settlement for that attorney who's going to sue you.
Completely agree. I would rather have more than not enough. So, all right, guys. Well, I really appreciate everything today, and thank you guys for being on. And probably the next time I join you guys next Friday, I'll be coming to you live from St. Pete. So
awesome.
Thanks a lot, Nick.
All right, guys. Well, you have a good day.
You too.
Everybody else out there, thank you guys for joining us today, and have a great weekend. And I'll see you next Friday.
This has been Home to All, an all-inclusive real estate podcast. Find Nick on Facebook and Instagram at downtown.expert, and also his website, www.downtown.expert, or call or text him at 407-508-8809. Thanks for listening.
Don't spend hours or days looking for your new home. Let a downtown Central Florida expert guide you. I'm Nicholas Acosta, and I'm here to welcome you home. Being a Florida native, I know how exciting, stylish, and convenient the downtown lifestyle can be. From the nightlife scene in the heart of downtown to the natural beauty of Florida. I'm Nicholas Acosta, and I'm here to welcome you home.